From 221 BCE until 1911, China was a large and powerful empire ruled by emperors who were considered to be the son of heaven. In this topic, we consider one of the most dramatic periods in Chinese history. Its move from being a declining empire in crisis in the early 20th century to that of a growing world power led by a communist government. So, let's begin. In the early 20th century, the Qing Dynasty, the last of the Chinese dynasties, was growing increasingly unstable and faced rapid decline. Finally, on January 1, 1912, the Republic of China was proclaimed, the last empire abdicated, and a provisional government was set up. These events marked the end of Imperial China and the beginning of a new page in Chinese history. In today's video, we will be taking a closer look into why the Qing dynasty collapsed in 1911. In essence, we can trace the collapse of the dynasty back to three related causes. First, the Qing dynasty's superiority complex. Second, foreign influence. And third, growing Chinese unhappiness with the Qing dynasty. China was an old and powerful empire dating back to 212 BCE. Since it had been so powerful, it believed that it was the best. All other countries had to bow to China, and China's rulers didn't want anything to change. As a result, in 1792, when a British expedition led by Lord Macartney was sent to ask for trading rights in China, they were denied. The emperor responded to these requests in 1793 in a letter to King George III by saying, "As your ambassador can see for himself, we possess all things. I set no value in objects strange or ingenious, and have no use for your country's manufacture." This tells us that China thought that it was the superior world power and had no interest in changing. And because China didn't want to change, when wars between China and the West broke out, China couldn't really defend itself. This brings us to our next reason for the Qing Empire's collapse: foreign countries and their influence. Let's first consider British influence in China. To fully understand this point, we must begin with the British obsession with tea. Tea was introduced to England in the 17th century and quickly became a very popular and fashionable drink. Tea was first discovered in China, and so the British had to trade with China to get it. However, the only thing that China would accept as payment for tea was silver. And since so much tea was being purchased, a lot of British silver was going to China. This created a trade imbalance that the English did not like. Basically, tea was draining England of wealth. Something had to be done, and in the 1830s, the British had found a solution: opium. Although it was illegal in China, opium, which is made from poppies, was the ideal solution for the British. It was grown in their colony of India, was in high demand in China, and had the added benefit of being addictive, so it never lost a customer. Over time, the illegal smuggling of opium grew from 200 chests in 1729 to 40,200 by 1839. In China, opium led to big social problems. It also created a drain of wealth, because now Chinese silver was leaving China to pay for opium. Now the imbalance of trade was in England's favor. Obviously, this was a problem for China, and in 1838, the emperor sent the official Lin Zhezhu to deal with the problem. To solve the opium problem, Zhezhu seized and destroyed 3 million pounds of British opium. This caused the British government to send a warship and troops to China, and the First Opium War broke out in 1840. The war ended with the signing of the Treaty of Nanjing in 1842. This treaty forced the Chinese to give in to many British demands. For example, Britain now controlled Hong Kong Island, more Chinese ports were open to Western traders, and China had to pay the UK a lot of money in reparations. The Chinese were humiliated. Britain continued to trade illegal opium, and tensions continued to rise. Due to these continuing issues, the Second Opium War broke out in 1856. The spark for this war was the capture of a British ship by the Chinese government. In return, British and French forces attacked near Beijing and burned down the Imperial Summer Palace. Eventually, the emperor was forced to sign the Treaty of Tianjin in 1860, which opened China to foreign ambassadors and missionaries, as well as the legalization of the opium trade. Now let's turn to the Asian influence in China. China had been the biggest power in Asia for thousands of years. Many other Asian countries, such as Vietnam and Korea, had to pay tribute to China. However, in the 19th century, China lost its power over many of these dependent states. Let's take a look at Korea. In 1894, Korea faced a civil war, and this allowed Japan to invade and take over. From 1894 to 1895, Japan and China fought a war, and Japan took over parts of northeastern China. This war ended with the Treaty of Shimonoseki in 1895, which forced China to give up control over Korea. So as you can see, by 1898, China was facing extreme pressure from many foreign countries, and it even appeared as if China might be partitioned by European powers. All of these unequal treaties bring us to our last point: growing Chinese unhappiness with the Qing Empire. China was facing a lot of problems within its borders. Large population growth, from 150 million people to 300 million, and temperature change which led to deforestation and starvation. Opium addiction, which caused social and financial problems. Corruption of government officials who weren't sending enough tax money to the emperor. And Christian missionaries who actively converted Chinese to Christianity and educated many Chinese on the benefits of change. These problems, along with the unequal treaties, combined to create many rebellions and uprisings within China. We will look at two: the Taiping Rebellion and the Boxer Rebellion. The Taiping Rebellion, which started in 1850 and lasted until 1864, was the largest and most destructive war until the 20th century. In fact, more than 20 million people were killed, which was more than the First World War. The leader of this rebellion was called Hong Xiuquan, who had converted to Christianity and also failed his examinations. For 30 days he was delirious after this failure and awoke believing himself to be the brother of Jesus Christ, and with the goal of getting rid of demons, which he believed were the leaders of the Qing Empire in Beijing. The rebellion was extremely popular and quickly spread across China. Eventually, the Taipings controlled a third of China. It took the Qing government millions of pounds and 15 years to put down the rebellion. This rebellion shows just how unpopular the Qing Empire was with many Chinese. On the other hand, the Boxer Rebellion of 1899 started because many Chinese hated Western ideas. They felt that the Chinese people needed to rise up against foreigners and defend China. In general, the Boxers went about murdering Westerners as well as Chinese people who they felt had ties to the West. Even owning a clock could get you killed. What made this rebellion really bad was that the Empress Dowager Cixi decided to use the Boxers to help the Qing Empire get rid of all foreigners. And on the 21st of June, the Qing Empire basically declared war on all foreign powers. Obviously, this made Western powers very angry, and in response, they launched a counterattack. The Chinese were no match for the modernized armies of the West, and eventually the emperor was forced to sign the Boxer Protocol, which was the harshest treaty of all, as it forced China to pay impossibly high reparations. All of these problems and unequal treaties caused the growth of a reform movement, as well as nationalist groups who demanded changes. Although some changes were implemented in the early 1900s, it was too little, too late. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.